A dog sits motionless on the cold steps of a church, refusing to leave, no matter how hard anyone tries. But when a nun uncovers the shocking reason why this K9 won't move, it's a discovery so heartbreaking, it brings the whole town to tears. What was hidden in the dog's past will make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty and love. You won't believe what happens next. Today, we're sharing a story so powerful, it's bound to leave you questioning the strength of the bond between animals and humans. A K9 dog, known for his bravery and loyalty, refuses to leave the steps of a church, and what a kind-hearted nun discovers about his past will bring the entire town to its knees. But before you find out what this loyal K9 did next, can I ask you one small favor? If you believe that no one should face their struggles alone, please hit that subscribe button. Most people scroll past these stories, but your click could help this message reach someone who truly needs to hear it. Please subscribe to Paws and Claws, and let's keep sharing these powerful moments together. A K9 dog, known for his bravery and loyalty, refuses to leave the steps of a church, and what a kind-hearted nun discovers about his past will bring the entire town to its knees. This isn't just a story about a dog, it's about love, loss, and the incredible bond that transcends time. In the quiet town of Riverside, the hustle and bustle of everyday life moved at a predictable pace. The streets, lined with small homes and cozy cafes, always had a sense of calm. The sounds of children laughing and playing, the hum of car engines on the road, and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze made Riverside feel like a place frozen in time, where nothing bad could ever happen. For most people in this town, the simple pleasures of life were all they knew. Days slipped by, sometimes too quickly, but always with a comforting familiarity. At the end of Main Street, nestled between two old oak trees, stood St. Mary's Church, a place of solace for the people of Riverside. With its tall steeple reaching into the sky and its weathered brick walls, the church was a symbol of stability, providing shelter and peace to anyone who entered its doors. It had been there for generations, witnessing births, marriages, and farewells. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, and for many, it was a sanctuary from the outside world. However, on one particular afternoon, something was about to happen that would shatter the calmness of Riverside. A strange occurrence would stir the heart of the town, leaving them with more questions than answers. It would involve a dog, a loyal companion to those who knew him. But on this day, his actions would puzzle everyone who laid eyes on him. Max, a K9 dog with the Riverside Police Department, was a familiar sight around town. He had been a fixture of the police force for years, known for his dedication and sharp instincts. His handler, Officer Jake, shared an unbreakable bond with him, one built on trust and mutual respect. Together, they had faced countless challenges, from chasing down criminals to sniffing out dangerous substances. Max had seen the worst of humanity, but he had also been there in the quiet moments, offering a comforting presence when things got tough. Everyone in Riverside knew Max. His powerful frame, sleek black and tan fur, and piercing eyes made him an unforgettable sight. He was a force to be reckoned with, but his temperament was nothing like his physical presence. Max was calm, steady, and unwavering. He was the type of dog who could sit silently for hours, waiting patiently for his next command. But on this particular afternoon, he wasn't the calm, composed K9 that everyone had come to expect. He wasn't moving. It had started as a routine day for Officer Jake. He had taken Max out for a walk, something they often did when there wasn't an active call. They had walked through the streets, greeted familiar faces, and checked in on their neighbors. Everything seemed normal until they passed by St. Mary's Church. Max, for reasons unknown, had suddenly stopped in his tracks. It wasn't as if there was something in front of him to catch his attention. No scent that only he could pick up, no animal to chase or criminal to apprehend. Max just stopped, dead in his tracks. At first, Jake thought it was a simple pause. Maybe Max was tired or distracted by something. But as the seconds ticked by, it became clear that something was very wrong. "Come on, boy," Jake called out, his voice a mixture of curiosity and concern. But Max didn't respond. His body was rigid, his posture alert, yet still. His gaze was fixed on the steps of the church, not moving an inch. Jake tugged at the leash, trying to pull Max forward, but the dog resisted. This wasn't typical Max behavior. This was a dog that had been trained to respond to commands. He had been through intense training in various situations, from crowded events to high-stress criminal chases, but he never refused a command. He had never acted like this. Jake's curiosity turned to concern. "What's going on, Max?" he muttered under his breath. crouching down beside the dog. Max's eyes remained locked onto the church steps, as though there was something there that only he could see. His unblinking gaze sent a chill down Jake's spine. Max was more than just a working dog. He was a part of Jake's family, and seeing him like this was unsettling. "Come on, Max. Let's go." Jake tugged again, more firmly this time. But again, Max didn't budge. A few people walking by stopped to look. Their curiosity piqued. Some offered Max treats, trying to coax him off the steps. But Max ignored them, still staring ahead with a deep intensity that no one could quite explain. His refusal to move was growing more perplexing with each passing minute. "Maybe he's just tired," one of the bystanders suggested. "He's been working hard lately. Poor thing must be exhausted." But Jake wasn't convinced. Max wasn't tired. He knew that dog better than anyone. Max had been through far worse days than this, and never once had he refused to follow orders. This was different. This was something else. Sensing that he wasn't going to get anywhere with just a few casual attempts, Jake called in backup. Within minutes, another officer arrived with a few other colleagues. They all tried to figure out what was wrong with Max. Was he sick? Did he have an injury? Was something wrong physically? But nothing seemed out of place. Max wasn't injured. He wasn't ill. He was just there, unmoving. It was as if the dog had become frozen in time, and no one knew why. "Is there something on the steps?" one of the officers asked, kneeling down to examine the area. They checked around, but there was nothing unusual on the steps. No object, no discarded food, no hidden danger. Just the cold stone beneath Max's paws, and the unsettling silence that now surrounded them. As the minutes dragged on, the crowd around them grew. More people gathered, their whispers filling the air. Some tried to offer advice. "Maybe he's just waiting for something," someone suggested. "Maybe he's waiting for someone." But no one knew what to make of it. The situation was becoming more bizarre by the minute. Max's behavior seemed so out of character that people began to feel uneasy. It wasn't just that he wouldn't move. It was the intensity in his eyes, the way he seemed fixated on something beyond their understanding. It was as though the dog was lost in his own world, one that no one else could see. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the town, the tension in the air was palpable. The town of Riverside had never seen anything like this. The once peaceful and predictable life in the town had been interrupted by the actions of a dog, and no one had the answers. But there was one person who might know. The scene was growing more puzzling by the minute, as the townspeople continued to watch from a distance, whispering and speculating. One person arrived who would change everything: Sister Mary. As the sun's glow began to fade, casting long shadows over St. Mary's Church, the town of Riverside had become a quiet theater for a drama that no one could quite understand. Max, the ever-loyal K9, remained immobile, his gaze fixed forward as if waiting for something that no one else could see. His body was tense, but still, his ears flicked occasionally, reacting to the ambient sounds around him. But his eyes, they never left the steps. They never once wavered. The rest of the world may have moved around him, but Max was frozen, as though caught in a moment he couldn't escape. The crowd's chatter turned to murmurs, people exchanging nervous glances. What had happened to the dog? Had he become unwell? Was there something in the air? Or was this a sign of some deeper issue? The local veterinarian, Dr. Ellie, was called in. She arrived with her usual calm demeanor, ready to help, but even she was puzzled. "Nothing seems physically wrong with him," Dr. Ellie said after a brief inspection. She checked Max for injuries, prodded him gently, and examined his eyes for any signs of distress. But there was nothing. Max, for all appearances, was perfectly fine physically. His strong muscles were taut, but nothing about him suggested illness. His tail, although stiff and unmoving, wasn't injured. His body language was a strange mix of alertness and confusion, as if he was lost in his own thoughts. "I don't understand it," Dr. Ellie said quietly, standing beside Officer Jake. "I've never seen him act like this. He's a trained K9. He doesn't just sit and stare for no reason." Jake ran his hand over his face, frustration written on his features. He had always trusted Max. More than just a colleague, Max was a companion, a friend, and now, he didn't know what to do. Something had happened to Max, something profound and unsettling, but he couldn't put his finger on it. The dog's refusal to move, his obsessive focus, and the look in his eyes. It was almost as if Max was waiting for something, or someone. "Maybe he's remembering something," Jake muttered, half to himself. The thought startled him, but it made a strange kind of sense. Max had been through a lot over the years. He'd been involved in numerous rescues, searches, and high-risk situations. The memories of those events the trauma, and the victory must have left their mark on him. Maybe something had triggered an old memory, one so powerful it had brought him to this point of stillness. But Jake couldn't shake the unease settling in his stomach. He had worked with Max long enough to know that dogs, especially trained K9s like him, didn't just freeze for no reason. There had to be something deeper, something hidden within Max's past that was pulling him to that very spot. He felt like he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle, a piece that had been waiting for years to reveal itself. "I'll stay with him," Jake decided, as he sat down next to Max, his voice quiet but determined. He gently placed his hand on Max's broad back, as if trying to comfort his dog. "Whatever's going on, I'm not leaving you alone." The crowd that had gathered outside the church watched in silence, unsure of what to do. People went about their business, but Max's strange behavior continued to linger in the air, like an unanswered question. Then, just as Jake's thoughts began to spiral, something unexpected happened. Sister Mary, the town's beloved nun, appeared at the edge of the crowd. She wasn't in a hurry, nor was she alarmed. Sister Mary was known for her gentle, unwavering calm in times of uncertainty. Her presence was like a soothing balm for any troubled soul, and in this moment, it felt as though the town had been waiting for her. She walked toward Jake and Max, her long skirt swishing quietly as she made her way through the gathering crowd. Without saying a word, she knelt beside the dog, placing one hand on his back and the other on his head. For a moment, Max didn't react. He simply continued to stare, unmoving. Sister Mary's eyes softened as she looked down at him. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she just sat with him, waiting, as if she knew that the answer to the mystery wasn't something that could be rushed. Her presence, calm and steady, seemed to ease the tension in the air, and for a moment, the crowd fell into a respectful silence. Max's tail twitched slightly, just enough to show he had noticed her presence, but he didn't move. It wasn't the kind of reaction that would have been expected from a dog who normally thrived on attention. But Sister Mary seemed unperturbed. She continued to sit beside Max, speaking softly to him, not in a commanding tone, but in a gentle, soothing manner. "Max," she murmured, "I know you've been through a lot. You've seen so much, haven't you?" The words were spoken as though she were speaking to a human, with a depth of understanding that made Jake pause. He had never heard anyone talk to Max like that before. There was a certain wisdom in Sister Mary's voice, a compassion that went beyond what anyone else had shown Max. After a few moments, she looked up at Jake, her face calm, but her eyes were filled with something deeper, something he couldn't quite name. "There's something inside him," Sister Mary said quietly, her gaze still on Max, "something he's been carrying for a long time. He's not just waiting here for no reason. He's been here before. He's searching." Jake frowned, puzzled. "Searching for what?" Sister Mary didn't answer immediately. She simply patted Max gently, her hands running over the soft fur on his back. Then, her eyes turned toward the church. Something about the way she looked at it, something in her expression, made Jake's heart skip a beat. He followed her gaze, but all he saw was the old stone building, weathered by time, yet still standing strong. There was nothing extraordinary about it, nothing that could explain Max's strange behavior. But Sister Mary seemed to know something the rest of them didn't. She had a deep understanding of animals, of the silent language they spoke, and she was beginning to connect dots that no one else could see. Sister Mary's calm and measured response didn't satisfy Jake. Her words only deepened his confusion. "He's been here before," she had said. What did that mean? Had Max been to this very church in the past? Was there some hidden connection, some memory buried deep inside Max that had brought him here? The crowd had started to disperse, leaving behind a lingering tension. But Jake and Sister Mary remained. The situation was far from over. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, and it was clear that there was more to Max's sudden strange behavior than anyone had anticipated. There was a history here, a past that had been sealed away, perhaps forever. Sister Mary, having sensed the growing uncertainty in Jake, turned toward him again. "Max is not just waiting for someone," she said. "He's waiting for something." Her words echoed in Jake's mind, but they didn't bring him any closer to the truth. What was it that Max was waiting for? What had happened in the dog's past that had led him to this exact moment, sitting on the cold stone steps of the church? As Sister Mary sat with Max, quietly watching him, a thought flickered in Jake's mind. Could it be possible that Max had a connection to someone, or something, connected to this church? Jake's mind raced, but before he could voice his thoughts, the air seemed to shift. Something was happening. The answer was close, and yet, it felt like they were all standing at the edge of a precipice, looking into the unknown. As Sister Mary sat beside Max, her fingers gently tracing the contours of his fur. Jake couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was seriously amiss. He had been Max's handler for years. He knew the dog better than anyone. Max had never been one to shy away from action or excitement. He was a creature of routine, a dog who thrived on working and responding to his commands. And yet, here he was, motionless on the church steps, fixated on something that none of them could see. "What do you mean, sister?" Jake finally asked, his voice low, as if he were afraid to break the stillness around them. "What do you mean by he's been here before?" Sister Mary looked at Jake, her eyes steady, filled with a quiet wisdom that seemed to transcend the years of experience they both shared. Her gaze shifted from Max to the church, and there was a faint flicker of recognition in her eyes, like someone who had been searching for something but hadn't realized they'd found it until now. Max's steady gaze never left the church steps. He wasn't reacting to the people around him. He wasn't responding to the questions, the curiosity, or the noise. He wasn't even aware of the people who had gathered to witness this strange scene. He was focused on the church, as though it held some secret, one that only he could unlock. "I don't know how to explain it, Jake," Sister Mary said softly, "but there's something here, something that's pulling him. Max isn't just waiting. He's searching for something. I don't think he knows what it is, but his heart knows. This place, this church, has a connection to him. I can feel it." Jake's eyes followed the nun's gaze. The church, he hadn't given much thought to it before, other than it being a place of solace for the townspeople. But now, as he looked at the ancient building, something felt different. It wasn't just the usual sight of the old church, with its towering spire and deep-set windows. It was as if the church itself was alive with some kind of hidden energy, something that had been dormant for years and was only now stirring. He felt a strange unease crawl up his spine, but Jake wasn't sure what to make of it. Sister Mary's words were cryptic, and though he trusted her judgment, he couldn't fully grasp the connection she was hinting at. Still, there was one thing he was sure of. Max's actions weren't random. The dog's refusal to move, his intense stare, the calmness in the air. This wasn't just an ordinary moment. This was something deeper, something tied to the past. "Max, buddy," Jake muttered under his breath. "What's going on?" Sister Mary placed a hand on Max's head, and this time, the dog seemed to respond. His ears perked up slightly, and for a brief moment, his gaze flickered away from the church steps. But then, as if something had called him back, his eyes snapped back to the church, unwavering. It was as if he had heard something only he could hear, a whisper in the air, calling him to this place. The crowd around them had grown quieter, sensing that something significant was happening. A few people, once unsure of what to make of Max's strange behavior, now stood in solemn silence. The whole town had gathered, but no one spoke. No one dared interrupt the moment. It was as though they were all waiting for something. Sister Mary, noticing the growing silence, turned toward the crowd. "You all should go home," she said gently, her voice soft but firm. "This is a moment for Max, and for all of us. We need to give him the space to remember what he's here for." With reluctant nods, the townspeople began to disperse. Some lingered, still watching from a distance, but most had respected the nun's wishes and quietly left the scene. But Jake wasn't ready to walk away. He remained kneeling beside Max, watching as the dog's posture seemed to shift ever so slightly. Something was changing. He could feel it in the air. The tension that had once hung heavy was now palpable, like the calm before a storm. Sister Mary remained beside him, offering quiet words of comfort as they both watched Max. "You know, Jake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "there are things we carry with us, memories, feelings, experiences, that aren't always easy to let go of. Even for a dog as strong as Max, those memories can stay with him. The bond between a dog and his handler, the bond with his past, it's not something that disappears just because time passes." Jake's thoughts flashed back to Max's past, a history he had never truly understood. Sure, Max had always been a loyal companion, a trusted partner in the field, but Jake had never asked much about the dog's past before the police department. Max had been a rescue dog, and beyond that, Jake didn't know much. But what if Max's attachment to this church was linked to something he had experienced before he came into Jake's life? "What are you saying, sister?" Jake asked, his voice soft but filled with confusion. "You think there's more to Max's story? Something that happened before he came here?" Sister Mary's eyes met Jake's, her gaze full of something unspoken, an understanding that Jake couldn't fully grasp yet. "I think Max has been to this place before, Jake, and I think he's here for a reason he may not even understand himself." Jake felt his heart race. Could Max have been here before? The idea was both absurd and yet strangely possible. After all, The dog had been through so much: rescues, search missions, high-risk operations. But what if there was something in his past, something hidden away, that had drawn him back to this exact spot? Was there a link to a moment Max had experienced long ago? Something painful, something that would explain his obsessive focus on the church? Jake's eyes flickered back to the church's steps, then to Max, still sitting there, his body tense, but his expression calm. He could feel the weight of the moment. The dog wasn't just sitting there. Max was waiting for something to reveal itself. Sister Mary's voice broke the silence again. "I think it's time we let Max remember." Jake turned to look at her, surprised by her sudden words. "Remember what?" Sister Mary didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slowly stood and walked toward the church, her steps deliberate and steady. As she reached the church door, she turned back to Jake. "I'll be back soon. There's something inside that church that needs to be found." With that, she disappeared inside the old building, leaving Jake with Max, standing alone in the growing dusk. The silence enveloped them once more. Max's eyes never left the church. The mystery was deepening, and the questions piled up in Jake's mind. What was inside that church? What did Max know that they didn't? And how was Sister Mary connected to all of this? The tension was unbearable, but before Jake could process it all, a thought crept into his mind, a haunting thought. Was Max here because of someone? Someone from his past? Someone he had known before he became a police dog? And as the church's wooden door creaked shut behind Sister Mary, a strange chill ran through Jake's body. The evening air had grown cooler as Jake sat beside Max, the silence between them thick with anticipation. The strange stillness of the moment was almost suffocating, and though Jake tried to focus on the situation, his mind kept wandering back to the thought of what might be waiting for them inside the church. Sister Mary had disappeared through the heavy wooden doors of St. Mary's Church, her footsteps echoing off the stone floor. It had only been a few minutes, but to Jake, it felt like an eternity. Max still hadn't moved. His eyes were locked on the church steps, as though there was something there that held his undivided attention. The dog's fur, once shiny and well-groomed, now looked slightly disheveled, his body language tense but resolute. Jake's thoughts swirled with uncertainty. What had happened to Max? He had never seen the dog this way before, as if caught between two worlds. And Sister Mary, there was something different about her. She had a calmness, a quiet understanding of things that Jake couldn't explain. She seemed to know something that no one else did. The way she spoke about memories, about bonds, and about Max's past, it had all made sense in a way that Jake couldn't fully understand. What was Max waiting for? Why had the church called him here? Suddenly, the church door creaked open, and Jake's heart skipped a beat. Sister Mary stepped out, holding something in her hands. She walked slowly toward him, her face as calm as ever, but there was something else in her eyes, something that Jake couldn't ignore. "Did you find something?" Jake asked, standing up quickly, his voice tight with curiosity and concern. Sister Mary didn't answer immediately. Instead, she knelt down next to Max, who, for the first time in hours, looked up at her. His intense stare softened, his body relaxing just slightly. He seemed to recognize her presence, and for a moment, it was as if time slowed down. "I found what Max was searching for," she said quietly, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and reverence. "And now, it's time for him to remember." Jake felt his heart race, a mixture of fear and hope clawing at his chest. What had Sister Mary uncovered, and why did it feel like this was the key to unlocking the truth behind Max's strange behavior? She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather collar. A collar that seemed ancient, much older than Max's current one. She held it in her hands, her fingers running over the faded stitching. "This," she said softly, "belongs to the dog Max once called his own." Jake stared at the collar, a sudden chill running through his spine. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't just any collar. This was a military collar, the kind worn by K9s in service. It was old, frayed in places, but still strong. The faint imprint of a name could be seen on the leather. David. The name was barely visible, as if it had been scratched and worn over time. But there it was, a name, one that seemed to carry a heavy weight with it. "David," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. "Who is David?" Sister Mary looked at him, her expression gentle but somber. David was Max's partner before he became a police dog. He was a soldier, a man Max grew to love and protect. They served together in the military, in dangerous missions overseas. David and Max were inseparable. But she paused, her voice thick with emotion. David didn't make it back. He couldn't live with the demons of war. Jake felt the air leave his lungs. David was Max's partner? The bond they shared must have been extraordinary, and now it made sense why Max had been acting so strangely. He had been to this church before. He had been here with David. Max wasn't just waiting for anything. He was waiting for a moment to remember the man he had loved and lost. Max's eyes never left the collar. He sniffed it gently, his body trembling slightly. It was as if the dog could still sense David's presence, as if the memory of his late partner was alive in the very air around them. David died in this church, Sister Mary continued, her voice barely a whisper. He came here one night, troubled, looking for peace. Max followed him. He wouldn't leave David's side, not even for a moment. But that night, David's struggle became too much. He took his own life here, in the church. Jake's mind spun, unable to process the depth of what Sister Mary was saying. David, Max's partner, had died here, right in this place, a place of sanctuary, of solace. But there was more to the story, more than anyone had ever known. Max had witnessed something so tragic that it had been seared into his memory. This wasn't just a case of a dog waiting for his owner. This was Max, trapped in the past, unable to move forward from the pain of losing his beloved partner. Max never forgot David, Sister Mary said, her voice full of compassion. Even when he became a police dog, even when he found a new handler, Jake, Max never let go of David. He carried that memory with him everywhere he went. And when he saw the church today, when he stood on these steps, I believe he was looking for the place where David last found peace. Jake stared at Max, his heart breaking. He understood now. Max's strange behavior wasn't a sign of weakness or illness. It was a sign of a deep, unshakable love and loyalty. Max had never truly been able to let go of David. The bond they shared was too strong, too deep. It transcended time, space, and even death. Jake kneeled down beside Max, his voice breaking as he spoke. "I'm sorry, buddy," he whispered, placing a hand on the dog's head. "I didn't know. I didn't understand." Max's eyes met Jake's, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of recognition, of understanding. It was as if Max was finally at peace, as though he had been searching for something all these years, something that only this church, this place, could provide. Sister Mary stood up and looked down at them both, her expression a mixture of sadness and hope. Max needed to remember. He needed to know that David was here, that he hadn't abandoned him. Now he can let go. Now he can move forward. Jake looked up at Sister Mary, his heart heavy with emotion. "What happens now?" Sister Mary smiled softly. "Now Max can heal, and so can you." As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, a sense of peace settled over the church steps. The crowd had long since dispersed, leaving only Jake, Sister Mary, and Max. For the first time in hours, the dog seemed to relax, his body no longer tense, his gaze softened, his tail giving a small, tentative wag. Max wasn't just a police dog anymore. He was a survivor, a dog who had been through more than most people could ever understand. But tonight, on the steps of the church, Max had found something he had been searching for all these years. A chance to remember, and a chance to finally let go. Sister Mary's words echoed in Jake's mind. Now Max can heal. It wasn't just Max who needed healing, though. Jake, too, was beginning to realize that some wounds took longer to heal than others. And sometimes, the things we carry with us, the people we've lost, stay with us longer than we'd like. But just like Max, Jake would learn to carry the memories with love and strength, not as a burden, but as a testament to the incredible bond that existed between a man and his dog. As the night grew darker and the church bell rang softly in the distance, Jake stood up and walked beside Max, who had finally gotten up from the steps. The dog looked up at him, his eyes full of trust and loyalty. "Come on, boy," Jake said softly. "Let's go home." And together, they walked into the night, no longer carrying the weight of the past, but embracing the future with the quiet strength that only true loyalty can bring. As Jake walked beside Max, he could feel the weight of the night pressing down on him. The dog, who had been so still, so lost just hours earlier, now walked with a renewed energy. There was something different in the way Max moved now, no longer burdened by the weight of his past, but rather with a quiet understanding, a peace that had eluded him for so long. Max had found his way back, and so had Jake, in his own way. It wasn't just Max who had healed in this moment. It was the bond between them, a bond forged in the unspoken, in loyalty, and in the years of trust they had built together. They had always worked side by side, facing danger and uncertainty together. But tonight, it was more than that. Tonight, it was about healing, a healing that neither of them had known they needed. As they walked away from St. Mary's Church, the cool night air filled their lungs, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth, and the faint sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. The streets of Riverside were quiet, save for the occasional chirp of crickets in the distance. But there was something else in the air now, something that felt almost sacred. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery light across the town. Jake glanced down at Max, who walked beside him with his head held high, his body relaxed but alert. The dog was still the same Max, strong, fearless, and ready for anything. But tonight, Max was different. He was free of the ghosts that had haunted him for so long. Suddenly, Max stopped. Jake looked down at him, and for a moment, the dog's gaze seemed distant, almost as if he were seeing something Jake couldn't. Max's eyes softened as he turned his head toward the church, his body tense for just a moment, but not in fear, more like a silent farewell. Max's tail gave a slight wag, and Jake paused, watching the dog closely. There was something so profound in that moment, a moment of finality, of closure. It was as if Max had said his goodbyes to David, the soldier who had been his partner, his friend. "Are you ready, boy?" Jake asked quietly, knowing the dog could hear the uncertainty in his voice. But in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Max had found peace, and Jake had too. Together, they had shared an experience that was beyond words, beyond explanation. Max turned his head back toward Jake, his eyes now calm, but there was a depth in them that Jake couldn't ignore. It was as if the dog had looked into his soul, understood everything that had been unspoken, and finally let go of the pain that had been consuming him. With one final, soft nudge against Jake's leg, Max started walking again, this time with a renewed sense of purpose. The tension that had been holding them both back, Max from his memories, and Jake from his own struggles, had finally lifted. They weren't just walking side by side anymore. They were walking together, as partners, as family. And for the first time in a long time, Jake felt like they were truly in sync. Max had found his peace, and now so had Jake. The pair walked back through the streets of Riverside, heading toward the quiet, familiar comfort of their home. There were no more questions, no more confusion, only the sound of their footsteps in perfect harmony as they moved forward, together. As they approached their house, Jake stopped for a moment, looking at Max. The dog was still looking up at him, with that same unwavering loyalty, as if to say, "We've come through it together." Jake reached down and gently scratched the dog's head. "You've been through a lot, Max," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "But we made it. You're home now." Max's eyes softened even more, and for the first time, Jake saw a flash of the warmth he had always known was there. The dog wasn't just a partner in the field anymore. Max was a friend, a companion who had been through the highs and lows with him. They had survived everything together, and now they could finally rest. But there was one final thing that Jake needed to do, one last gesture to show Max that the journey was truly over. "Let's go inside," Jake said softly, and he gently opened the door to their home. As they stepped inside, the familiar smells of their house, warmth, safety, and the faint scent of freshly baked bread greeted them. Max, ever the vigilant protector, took his place near the door, his body settling into its usual spot. Jake closed the door behind them, turning to look at the dog one last time. For a brief moment, everything was still. Max, who had once carried the weight of a painful past, was now resting in the place where he belonged, with the person who had always been there for him. Jake sat down beside him, his heart heavy, but at peace. The pain of the past had been laid to rest. The bond between man and dog had been solidified in ways that words couldn't capture. Max, looking up at him, let out a small sigh, a content, peaceful sigh, as if he had finally found the place he had been searching for all along. And in that moment, Jake knew they would never be apart again. As the days passed, Max returned to his usual routine, patrolling, training, and working alongside Jake. But there was a different energy now. The weight that had once lingered over him had lifted, and the connection between him and Jake had only grown stronger. The healing process was complete, and though the past would always be a part of Max's story, it no longer held him captive. And in the quiet moments of their daily life, when Jake would look down at Max, he knew that they had both been through something extraordinary. They had faced the ghosts of the past, confronted the loss, and emerged stronger. Together, Max had been more than just a police dog. He had been a protector, a loyal companion, and a survivor. His story was one of love and loss, of sacrifice and devotion. The town of Riverside would never forget the day Max returned to the church and found peace, but neither would Jake. For both of them, it had been a journey of healing, a journey that would continue as they moved forward, side by side. If you believe in the power of loyalty and the bond between animals and humans, don't forget to subscribe to Paws and Claws For more heartwarming stories, like Max's, share this video to remind others about the strength and love animals bring into our lives.